Welcome to Lesson 2 of the Stellaris Block of the Month for 2019. Last month we made, or did you make, I hope you made, all 42 of these little guys. We got them all together. This month we're going to do some partial foundation piecing and put those in a block. Let me just show you. You all know me, I like to do everything by hand. So when I did this, I did it by hand. And there's a little bit of a difference. Here you see your point and two background pieces. These two background pieces are the same with the exception that one is the mirror image reverse of the other. For the foundation piece, because you want all straight line seams and you don't want this little inset seam here, we're going to place our piece that you made on here, and then we're going to add one background piece and another background piece. You'll see they're slightly different. Your pattern instructions will tell you the size to cut for piece 2 and piece 3, and we're going to show you the steps that you take for completing this as a foundation. Now if this was just a single point, you could just put a piece of fabric here and treat it like any foundation piecing pattern, but because of this we have to exactly line up this piece to that shaded area. Now I'm going to work not from the front because we're going to be sewing from the front side and pinning the fabric to the back side. So you're going to hold this up to the light, double check, so you make sure this is exactly lined up. You have to look through the light to make sure, because we're going to be sewing from the printed side but pinning all the fabrics to the right side. And once you're sure that that's exactly lined up, now we're going to get our piece number 2 that goes on here. And you might want to sort them into piles, maybe actually put a post-it note on them. But we're going to lay this down here, right along the line. Now, normally we might trim this to the 1/4 inch exactly, but since we know it's already exactly a 1/4 inch, we just line up the cut edges right here. Now, before I sew that or pin it, we're going to go like this and make sure it's going to fill the space. And it will. That extra point on the paper, remember we cut that oversized, so that's not even part of the design. So this will fit on there. So I'm going to pin this exactly in place. I'm not going to pin right on the sewing line because we don't want to pin across there, so I'm going to pin it down here. But I know it's lined up, and then I'm going to turn this over. Now, because this was a complete piece and we've got the seam allowance, we're not sewing on this outer line, we're sewing on the actual seam line. So let me go to the machine and do that, and then we'll show you the next step. I have this all pinned and ready to go, and remember we're going to sew from the paper printed side. And I'm not going to sew this outer line because that's the seam allowance in there. I'm just going to sew on that inner line. I'll start the stitching just a little bit outside, not right at the edge. So right along that line and a little bit past. Pull it out. Clip my threads. Take the pin out. So then I'm going to put it here, take this pin out, and I'm just going to press it. Now, I love this woolly mat for pressing all my pieces, and I also love this spray bottle. I'll give you a nice spray and show you how nice that is. But I only need a little bit for this. I'm just going to give it it gives a very, very fine mist, and I like it better than steam. It just, with the woolly mat, just gives you a nice press right there. So what we need to do now is trim along this next sewing line. So I'm going to take a postcard, get all these from different shows and stuff. You can do a variety of postcards, and I'm going to fold right along that line. That postcard will help you do it. Now you'll see where I went beyond a little bit with my stitching. I'm just going to give that a little tug right there like that. And this is where I really like this at a 1/4 ruler. It's got a little lip on it that's just at a 1/4 inch. And I can just pull that in here. You can see how it just butts up next to that. If I use the other side of the ruler, it's, you know, slippery. But this one, you just butts right up next to it. And I'm just going to take and trim this off. And now I'll be ready to add my next piece. So if I go back over to this side, I'll take my bigger piece that goes in number 3, the second line of sewing. Be careful if you're using one of the kits that has this super light fabric, because it's kind of hard to see the difference between the right and the wrong side. So this is the right side, that's the part that I want up. So I'm going to put right sides together along here. I'm going to just fold this up, and it looks like that will fit there, so that's fine. So now I'm just going to pin this. Again, don't pin in the seam line because you don't want to be sewing on top of it and break the needle on your machine. I'm just going to put a pin right here. Then I'm going to sew. Again, I'll start a little bit outside the edge of the unit that I'm sewing, because that'll just tear away from the paper later. I'll just go a little beyond, cut my fabric stitches off, take the pin out. Now once again I'm going to go over here and press. I give it just a tiny little spray onto this woolly mat. So that's all the sewing I have to do, except the next stage is I need to trim all of this around. So now's the time I can trim right to the edge of the block. Line it right up at the edge. Do the same on all 3 sides of this triangular piece. Okay, so here you see the one we've just done with the foundation piecing. Here's the one I did by hand. I didn't mention to you earlier that I do, when I make the foundations, you're going to need 42 of those if you're doing it this way. I love the Carol Doak foundation paper. It tears easily, comes apart easily. You'll be able to remove it. But do not remove the paper yet. If you've done it with foundation piecing, we'll wait and remove it once it's all into the quilt and completely surrounded by other pieces of the fabric, and then you'll remove it. So whichever way you want to do it, you have the templates are in your pattern if you've had the pre-printed templates. Here you'll see template for the 2 small pieces. We did that earlier, and you'll notice the difference between this template Q here. It's spaced here, and then it's the mirror image. So for foundation piecing, you have the seam going off at an angle this way. For hand piecing, you've got the seam coming this way. So it just depends. The templates are here. If you want to do it by hand, again, it conserves a lot of fabric if you do it by hand. Doing the foundation piecing takes about twice as much fabric. So it's up to you what you want to do and whether you want to do it by hand or machine. But it's a lot of those to get done before next time, so get busy, and then we will continue assembling this quilt next month. Have fun.